Yehiu l'ratzonim reifi, v'higion libi lefanecha Adonai tzorei v'goali. May the words of my mouth and thoughts of my heart be acceptable before you, O God, my rock and my redeemer. Shalom all. Welcome to our classes from the Kabbalistic classic called Hesed Avraham, the mercy to Abraham, written by the famous 16th century scholar Rabbi Abraham Azulai of Old Hebron, and I am, of course, your host Ariel Tzadok of KosherTorah.com. This book, Hesed Avraham, is a compendium of many different mystical teachings from numerous different sources. Rabbi Azulai lived at the time when the teachings of the Lurianic school, the Ariel, was just beginning to proliferate. And that puts him at a very important place in time, if you will, in the history and the development of Kabbalah. Because once the Torah of the Ari hit the Kabbalah world, it literally took the entire direction of Kabbalistic study and made a 90-degree turn going completely in that direction. Pretty much leaving behind in the dust all the older schools of what we call the prophetic Kabbalah, some will call the magical Kabbalah. And it's not like Rabbi Chaim Vital, the redactor of the Ari system, didn't know these other systems or practice them. Indeed, he did. And Rabbi Chaim Vital's material, writings on prophetic Kabbalah, although they were censored, are readily available today. And his writings on magical Kabbalah have also been recently published. He was a great eclectic Kabbalist. But Rabbi Azulai, a later contemporary, like a generation after, if you will, he brought together a number of source materials in and along, if you will, that same eclectic thought pattern as Rabbi Vital before him. That he brought a lot of the material from the Ari, true, but a lot that wasn't. And therefore, this book, Hesed Avraham, is an excellent source, an excellent blend of the old and the new. And that is what makes its material so valuable. Because once the system of the Ariel, like a tidal wave, swept over everything else, it literally changed the landscape. Hesed Avraham is one of those last things that, if you will, those little islands that pop up. And therefore its information is of great value to us. With that basic introduction, without having to get into the academic review of the organization of the text, I don't really think that's necessary for now. I want to share with you a topic. It's for those of you who are familiar with the Hebrew original. It's from Ayin Sheni Ayin HaKorei, Nahar Yud Tet. In other words, the second stream, if you will, it's called the Eye. All right, Ayin, the Eye HaKorei, the eye that reads. It's from the 19th river. That's how he subdivided his books, if you will. All right, and this is the secret of a Magid and the secret of prophecy. This is one of those interesting types of teachings that the philosophical Kabbalah of the Lurianic system, while it might mention, doesn't really explain, but he does here. And therefore, this is of importance to us, not only academically, that we can be exposed to these types of teachings that others just aren't aware of or don't deal with, but rather, maybe with the grace of God, to jumpstart our curiosity enough, maybe to try to practice some of this stuff. So in that introduction, let me read to you what he says. And of course, I'll read the Hebrew and translate it and comment as we go along. Da, ki min ha'esek שאדם עוסק בתורה ומצוות, מזה נבראו מלאכים קודשים, וזהו כפי ערך עסק התורה. And it says no. That from the work that a person works within Torah and the commandments, from this are created holy angels in accordance to the level of one's level of work. This is for those who are following along again. Ma'ayin Sheni Nahar Yud Tet. Section 2, subsection 19. Okay. What does it mean to work in the Torah and the commandments? And what and how do we create angels? First of all, let's strip away mythology, because this is something people don't understand. Angels, in and of themselves, are independent races of intelligent entities that exist in other dimensions and on other planets. They have numerous different forms for the different species. What we are referencing here as angel is not them. This is why using the term angel here, in my opinion, isn't the best term to use, whereas at the same time it is appropriate because it's explaining the function of these entities as opposed, if you will, to their actual reality. Let me explain. Entities exist throughout the universe. We don't create them, we don't destroy them, let's try to shoot them, or anything of the kind. But there are other dimensional realities. We are very well aware of sexual procreation here in this physical world of ours. We all get that. Well, when you are studying the Torah, meditating and contemplating and creating things, well, how are you creating things? The vast majority of people pretty much create nothing because they don't understand what it is that they're doing. But let's explain. Science knows very well that for every thought out of the head emanate brainwaves. Woo, 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 woo. Watch some science fiction movies or some science programs, you'll understand. When the focus of mind and attention and concentration are strong enough that we can concentrate brainwave activity, we can actually place into the brain thought patterns an autonomy which maintains itself for however long it does. Modern science will tell you that the brain waves, they don't dissipate and disappear. They just go flying out there, and they're out there somewhere. Literally, our entire planet is caked over with the brain waves of people from the beginning of existence till today, still floating around. Maybe thinner and thinner in time, but for those who are sensitive and those who know the skills, you can tap into those brainwave patterns of anyone in collective humanity from anywhere. In the occult literature, tapping into this brainwave collective is called the Akashic Records. It's real, it's out there, it just is. Well, we have the ability to influence the collective thought, thinking of humanity. Carl Jung, the famous father of analytical psychology, came up against this like a brick wall. He was dealing with psychotic patients. Those who are out in La La Land, totally disconnected from our reality. And in trying to understand the psychotic state, which is very interesting. He was coming over and over again against an experience which he couldn't explain. Psychotic patients were describing in detail images, ideas, and concepts from foreign religions, foreign cultures, foreign languages, the likes of which, after comprehensive patient historical studies verifying that the patient could have had absolutely no access to that material, to have entered into their conscious mind at any time. How did it get into their heads? This is where he came up with the concept of what he calls the collective unconscious, in which somehow, somewhere we're all connected. This is it. This is not mysticism or philosophy. This is science. This is real. This is how the sixth sense and telepathy works. We can and do tap into and touch things. So therefore, you will hear in mystical literature, they say thoughts are things. And indeedy do they are. And I might add, a famous teaching of the Baal Shem Tov, from Sefer Baal Shem Tov Amud Tefillah, quote in the Hebrew, Efo Adam Choshev Shamhu. Translate, where a person thinks is where he is at. Or in other words, our thoughts contribute to the creation of our reality. You got a good attitude? Well, that good attitude will take you through the good things in life. You got a bad attitude? It'll take you through the bad things in life. When you pass out of the body, the only thing you are left with is your mind and your thoughts. And if your mind and thoughts are polluted in hell, guess where you end up on the other side? In the hell of your own imagination. Which is why I fear for our dear Christian and Islamic neighbors who have the concepts of the fire and brimstone hell. My goodness, the place where some of them are going to create for themselves. Horrible. But our job continues. When your mind is focused on the positive, in an emotional and intellectual merging of the projecting of good onto the collective, this and this alone is what we call Asik b'Torah, a true work or service of the Torah, and mitzvot, the commandments. So just sitting back and reading your religious book or wearing the costumes of orthodoxy does not make you religion. Indeed, you're probably creating a greater hell for yourself than many others. But for those who are sincere and honest in their devotion to good, to light, not in a spirit of divisiveness and darkness, but in a spirit of unity and light, they are the ones who are truly involved in the work of Torah, the work of mitzvot. The positive vibes, energy, thought patterns, emotions that project from them in their brainwaves and energy patterns takes on an autonomous, independent existence that continues and acts as agents of good, and like attracts like. And such thoughts, such feelings float around the world, and they become messengers of light, or what he refers to here as holy angels. Now, though it's outside of the context of our text here, I'll share with you a little secret. Part of Magid meditations, and I covered this in our Magid course available on KosherTorah, is that when we want to connect to the energy patterns, mind, thought of one of the ancients, it could be Moses, it could be Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, it could be the Ariel or Rabbi Azulai himself. What we do is chant the words that individual has said. Chant is for the sake of focusing both mind and heart into the experience of that individual through the words that they say. And symbolically speaking, it says that the lips of the one in the grave will start to move with the words that you speak. But by you speaking their words with the proper focus and intent, you're literally calling into the Akashic Records, into the ether, into the collective unconsciousness, those brainwaves from that individual, and drawing them to yourself. And they can come wham, bam, into your mind, into your thoughts, to influence you, to inspire you. And this is what is called Ruach HaKodesh. And this is actually explained right here in the section here, right at the end. I just kind of skipped everything and jumped to the end there, but we'll get to that. But now you hopefully have a better understanding of when we're talking about creating holy angels, what this all means. Moving right along. כי אם תהיה הלימוד לשמה, אז יהיה גם כן המלאך הנברא ממנו קדוש יותר ונאמן, גם כן בדבריו. If one is doing one's studying for the right reasons, like I said, focus on properness within, then the thought forms that go forth, he says here, or the angel created thereof, is more holy, and therefore truthful in all things. ואם יהיה הלימוד בחסרון ושיבוש וטעות חס וחלילה, אז כפי מה שחסר מאותו מצווה, כן יחסר אור המלאך ההוא. And if, forgive my unrabbinic language, if you're screwing around, how's that? And your learning, your study, your focus of mind is lacking. It's confused. It's full of all kinds of weaknesses or mistakes because you're not really giving a hoot. God forbid, he says. Then in accordance to what you project out there is what you create. And he states here, whatever is lacking in you is going to be lacking from the light of the angel or the projective energy that you project. Got it? This is why what we inside of us create takes on autonomous life. This is why we focus on good character, good deeds, and all of those who only focus on the superficial, all they create is something superficial. Now, in the energetic world, we have a special word for the superficial. In other words, it's on the outside but not the inside. Come on, you guys who you know Hebrew. What do we call that? A klipa. And a klipa, husk or shell, that's the term that we use for the forces of evil. So in all due respect, sorry if you think I'm being judgmental, the vast majority of religious people today are only creating vessels for evil because of their superficiality and their fundamentalism and their extremism. They have become agents of evil, as opposed to the agents of good that they claim to be. Oh, excuse me. You might think that I just made that up where I'm expressing my own opinion. I'm really not. I'm quoting, if you will, the Baal Shem Tov from Sefer Baal Shem Tov, Parsha Shemot Od Aleph. For those of you who got to look up the source, where in which the Baal Shem Tov said very clearly, for those who are religious and observe their religion, but they don't do it with this lishama, for the proper attitude, the words of the Baal Shem Tov are kol holech el klipot. Everything goes to the dark side. So, that's what it says. And that's why you will see why those elements and aspects of religion are so negative and evil. That's, what goes around comes around. What can I say? But now let's move on. Ha'inyan, the matter. כי בהיות האדם צדיק וחסיד ועוסק בתורה ומתפלל בכוונה, הנה בוודאי שאין שום דבר שאין לו ממש. אפילו הקול היוצא מהכאת המטה וכיוצא בו, אינו לבטלה כי נזכר בזוהר פרשת שלח. אמנם הכל לפי המעשה ולפי בחינת הנשמות. Listen to what he says here. If a person is truly righteous, pious, is embracing Torah, the right reasons, they are prayers with proper focus and intent, he says certainly there's nothing that doesn't have a reality to it. Remember, thoughts are things, positive or negative. And he states here, even the sound, he used here the word the voice, that comes from the striking of the staff, anything, nothing is, it says here, nothing is without, or nothing is neutralized, it goes away. Everything has an energy to it. Everything has a power to it. And he quotes here the Zohar as his source, Parshat Shalach Lecha, Helik Gimel, page 169a. He says, everything goes in accordance to the deed, and he says the aspect or element of soul, which, if you will, is the level of consciousness. So here is the great equalizer. Like it says in the Tana de Eliyahu Rabbah, chapter 9, that Eliyahu Navi says, male or female, free man or slave, consider that levels of psychology, Jew or non-Jew, all can receive a Ruach HaKodesh, this divine inspiration, depending on their deeds. So you, my dear KosherTorah listeners, as you know, I am proud to open up our audience to everyone everywhere. I don't care who you are, I don't care what you are. I don't even care if you're human or non-human. What difference does it make? You're created by God, there you go. Our job is to shine the light. Our job is to project the positive. And therefore, the great equalizer is that if you join in the work of shining the light, then like Isaiah 41 says, you become a light to the nations. You've just risen up to fulfill the office, the mission, and the purpose of being Israel. And that's what, in quote, God's chosen are. So for those who want to understand things properly, recognize that definitions are not in the skin, but in the deed. What we create becomes real. Think about that. Da. Ki gadol koach hamalach hana'asim min haTorah yoter me'otam hana'asim min hamitzvah. The power of an angel created by Torah study is greater than those created by the commandments. Now, let's explain this. Thoughts are things. There is energy projection in the physical world, and then there is energy projection in the realm of mind. For those of you who are familiar in the Chinese tradition, the energy projection into the world is called Qigong. The energy projection into the realm of the mind is called Shengong. That's pretty much what we're talking about here, Shengong. So therefore, when you are busy creating things in your mind for positive projection, you're doing something really powerful in the collective consciousness. The one who was really big at doing this was, needless to say, the Arizal, Rabbi Chaim Vital, and after him, Rabbi Shalom Sharabi, the famous Rashash, in which they did what's called kavanot, or yichudim, visualization, constructs of concepts, projecting into the ether, the greater realms, or the olamot as they would call it, and therefore creating the reality which they contemplate. I would think the vast majority of people doing these things today have no idea what they're doing. They're just doing the mechanics of the form without really recognizing the essence, but our work continues. But this is what it's all about. So, when you're doing physical work, physical activities, that creates energy at a single level. But when you're focused in the realm of the mind, it's much more refined, like a laser beam. And that makes it more powerful. V'zeh sod ha-malachim ha-magidim le'adam u'modi'im lahem atidot v'sodot ha-nistarim halo hema ha-na'asim et-torah mitzvot shel ha'adam. This is the secret of the angels, who are called the spirit guides, who guide human beings and reveal to them the secrets of the future, the secrets of the things concealed. Because these become, or rephrase that, these are the ones, the conduits that are created by our working in Torah and mitzvot. So essentially, when we project positive energy out into the universe, that positive energy comes back to us. Surely goodness and mercy shall pursue me all the days of my life. Psalm 23, there you go. This is the great secret. So when people say, I want to know how to see the future, I want to discover secrets, there's a way to do it. And it begins by you having a mind that is able to receive it. And the only way your mind is able to receive it is for your mind to first project it. Likes attract likes. So when your mind is able to project and focus the proper energy, that goes all the way out into the ethers, floats around the world a gazillion times, attaches on to similar types of thoughts, mentalities, which are not limited in either space or time. And your mind magnetically draws it all back to you. And that is how come you're able to pick up thoughts from people who lived 4,000 years ago. You want a good one? You can also pick up thoughts from people who will be alive and living 4,000 years from now. You can pick up thoughts from this dimension or the next dimension. Indeed, you can pick up a whole bunch of stuff from everywhere. So therefore, when you raise your psychic antenna and you get in a gazillion different stations all at once, if you will, the process of cultivating the prophetic voice is to learn how to fine-tune and listen in. This is why whenever somebody has a vision or a prophecy, why it could be true, why it could be false. And this is an important thing, because people do receive information, but that doesn't mean it's from our quantum reality. So it's very easy to train yourself to get this energy receptivity. But then it's a lifetime of refinement to tone it down. So for example, again, you can raise up your psychic antenna, and you get the whole spectrum of 1,000 different psychic radio stations. And then you spend the rest of your life trying to tune into just one. And then again, the right one. Continuing. Yesh anashim she'inam mitgalim lahem kol ikar ויש שמתגלים להם בקצת, ויש מגידים אמיתיים שהן אותן נעשים מתורה ומצוות שנעשו בשלמות בלי חסרון. There are times when people can have revelations that don't reel on anything. There are times they get minor amounts of insights. And then there are those true guides, which indeed lack nothing, made from the purity of the proper Torah mitzvot. They are projected complete, and therefore it comes back to the person complete without anything missing. Yesh magidim she'en meshakrim katzat. There are those spirit guides that sometimes lie. Now, they're not evil demons out to condemn your soul to hell. They might not be lying to you in any intent and purpose to confuse and destroy you, even though that does indeed happen. We have the famous biblical example from the book of Kings, where God intentionally sent a lying spirit into the mouths of the prophets with the intent that the king of Israel would believe them, go off to battle, and get killed. Gee whiz. Thanks God. But this is how it is. You see, just like we human beings, you have true and false, those who know and don't know. When we create something which is as incomplete as our we, like it says in Old Latin, caveat emptor, let the buyer beware. So whenever, or if ever, you were to have a active imagination, that's the psychological term for a Magid experience, you visualize, you project, there's a guy standing in front of you and he's going to talk to you. Eventually he takes on an autonomous reality and starts giving you information. The last thing in the world you should do is just say, yep, got it. Whatever you say is 100% true, cause it ain't. Many of you might be familiar with a genre of literature popular today in the New Age circles called channeled literature. You get all these different kind of channels. This one's speaking from the ancient Atlantean warlords. This one is speaking from the aliens from the Pleiades. And everybody, I've read all this. I find this stuff so funny. One guy wrote books that he says came from God. One guy wrote books that says came from the angel Michael. The other one came from the book of the angel Gabriel. And each and every one of these, in quote, channeled literatures absolutely contradicts the others. In other words, what you have in each of these are projections of the individual imaginations of the individual, maybe with a little peppering or flavoring of something real mixed in. And it takes a refined mind to be able to distinguish between this and that. But it's interesting when you look at this that people who write this material and the people who believe it all think this is absolute truth. And my absolute truth is absolutely right and yours is wrong. And then you have those spirits of division and of course then you creations of all kinds of strife. But that's the world of religion and spirituality. So, the individuals who are focusing on this or receiving this information, for the most part, they're not intentional deceivers and liars out there to condemn your soul to hell. They believe it. Why? Because that's their reality. Why? Because that's where they're at. Why? Because that's where they've chosen to be. Where you think is where you're at. It's really that simple. So if and when I get some channel information from the guy from ancient Atlantis or the guy from the alien Pleiades, you always listen. Okay, thank you very much. Very nice to know. And it might have meaning, it might have legitimacy, or it might not. So whenever you or I have a Magid experience, if and when we too find ourselves in a position of said reception, you've heard me state in many another class, as I do reiterate here, caveat emptor, let the buyer beware. Always welcome your malach, your angel, your magid, your guide, with a healthy dose of skepticism. Welcome, O heavenly visitor. I am here to reveal to you the secrets. Cool. What do you got to say? Well, first you must do something weird. No, I'm sorry, I'm really not into weird. Well, if you don't, I won't reveal it to you. Well, okay. Have a nice day. We'll see you later. No, I'm here to tell you. Well, then tell me already. Cut the baloney. You got to stop the folk. You got to stop the baloney. You got to stop the phony baloney stuff, which we all too often, we're so desperate for some kind of a spiritual experience, we jump through hoops. And that's what gets us twisted. Of course, our minds are twisted. Somebody correctly said here in text, a spiritual litmus test. Very true. Whenever spirits, whatever come, that's the way it is. Anything associated with drug or alcohol use, you can pretty much put a big X through it. People who have a background in the usage of mind-expanding drugs, marijuana and the like, you got to be very careful with doing this kind of stuff because those chemicals are in your brain. They have opened up places that could make things very bad. Now, I knew rabbis in Jerusalem told me that anybody who has an experience with mind-altering drugs, they would never really be able to get a clear and proper experience kacha, because it's just messed up the genes. So I don't know how long that lasts or whatever, but you got to be very, very careful with that. So somebody here in text saying, does that have to do with alcohol drinking? Well, alcohol doesn't affect you in the same way as hallucinogenic drugs. So, big difference. But moving right along. Alright, ha'inyan, the matter. Ki afa pi shehu malach kadosh. Even though you got a holy angel there. Makom makom ukolom tovera. It's still a combination of good and evil. Lefi bechinat ha'maaseh v'mitzvah she'oseh ketzat b'shlimut u'ketzat b'chesaron. All in accordance to what we've done, our focus, sometimes complete, sometimes lacking. Just remember, all of these Magidim are the projections of our own mind thought, which take on an autonomous existence after projection from our thoughts. And that's how we have to understand it. So the clearer we are, the better we are. What can I say? Anyway, moving right along. People are writing me so many things here in the text. I just don't have the time to keep up with your comments. So I apologize. Let's focus. Da, now know. Ki yesh magidim shemolam ha'asiyah shem nivra'im al yidei ha'mitzvot ma'asiyot bli kavanah. You have different types of thought projections which go forth from the different functions and focus of what we do. Rabbi Azulai is going to refer to them within the context of the Kabbalistic worlds and within the context of religious observance. So he states the first level emanate from what's called the world of Asiyah, which corresponds to the physical acts of observance of the commandments we do that are done without any thought, just activity. This is the lowest level of thing. When you do something good, a good deed, even though your mind is not focused on it, still you did a good deed. One of the best good deeds I think I've ever done, I remember many, many years ago when I lived in Chicago. I was standing on the street corner, waiting for the light to turn to cross the street. This little old lady literally came out of nowhere, grabbed my arm, and said, "Young man, would you help me across the street, please?" And I did. Actually, the old proverb, helping a little old lady cross the street. I really did. And not that I solicited, but I was very proud to do that. Right? That's like the archetypal good deed. Well, obviously, I projected good thoughts out there, and pray God that those good thoughts went around. But that's what we're talking about. That's not something that I was meditating, focusing, concentrating. Happened. Sends out a good deed. Sends out good energy. The next level comes from the domain called Yetzirah. Entities or thought patterns created at that level come from the study of Torah. And again, those are more, if you will, sometimes emotionally based. Then you have those he calls them here spirit guides from the world of Biri'ah, which come by the power of Kavanah Tovah, good intent, and from Machshavot Torah v'mitzvot, and the contemplations of Torah and the commandments. Or in other words, when you are thinking about contemplating religious good, religious truths, this creates in that religious level of the worlds. And that's a good level of doing things. And he states here, Kol olam v'olam me'elu yish kama halakim mishunim ze mizeh. Each and every one of these levels, here he refers to them as worlds. There are many, many different levels and degrees within each and every one of them. And he says, this is not the place to get into all the details. The hasiman, the sign here, he says, is L'mi she'ra'ui la'amin bo u'b'divarav u'ka'asher ye'amiti b'divarav kulam v'kol divarav yihiyu l'shem shamayim says the real sign here, someone who you can believe in, an entity that you can believe in, an entity that's going to be completely true, is when you yourself, everything that you do is for the sake of heaven. That everything you do, even a single letter, in other words, complete focus. And from this you will be able to explain and understand the secrets of the Torah and all of its mysteries. And in accordance to that which we visualize and experience through the act of imagination, visualization of a Magid, based upon what this, in quote, Magid is telling us, we're able then to recognize who and what it is, and be able to therefore discern its level. So therefore, when it passes the spiritual litmus test, as you will, then we can rely upon it. But then again, we test these things. The process, the mechanics of how this is done, is often discussed in Jungian psychological literature using the psychological term active imagination. I've taught this in many of our meditation courses, in which you actually, in Abulafia, uses this same technique. Oh gosh, 700 or so years before the Jungians ever thought of it. And that was, Abulafia stated, you visualize a person standing in front of you, a being of light, and you project in your mind, telepathic communication, speak to me, your servant. And you place your mind in an open position, and then you allow the imagination to run wild, and you allow this make-believe entity to make-believe talk to you and to say whatever the make-believe entity wants to say. And as you allow your imagination to go, not limiting it by this limiting mentality, oh, I'm making this all up as I go along. Well, maybe you are, maybe you're not. You open yourself up, the forces that come through the collective consciousness into your mind. And by creating the image in your mind, you have created the vessel or vehicle through which the contact of the collective consciousness comes through. And once that information is received, then as I said, you got to run it through the sifter to make sure it's kosher. Now that doesn't mean that he's going to pass a theological litmus test, but you got to see if it's true or not. Many a time entities come that are, again, reflections of our own inner state of confusion. And therefore what we have revealed to us is equally confusing. Got to sift that out. Actually, this is a very good psychological, self-introspective technique to help us refine our inner selves. And it's a universal technique in almost every meditative school of discipline in almost every culture that I know of. I mean, the Eastern religions do it. I believe the Sufi traditions do it. This is our Kabbalistic traditions. The Jungians get it from the psychological point of view. But again, you start talking like this to your modern rationalist, who's so superficial, and you might as well be looking at a blank screen. They just don't get it. But, okay, what can you do? No. Shesod hanivu'ah. Now, we shift tracks to talk about prophecy. Hu hakol shiluach melamala lidaber im hanavi hahu. V'ken ruach hakodesh b'ofanze. Prophecy is the voice that is sent from above to speak with the prophet. And he says, Ruach HaKodesh, divine inspiration, operates in this same mechanical function. V'zeh, and this is, Hakol HaRuchani, Efshar levado litkashem, uliknos ba'oznei hanavi hahu, im lo sheitlabesh techila, bo'oto kol hagashmi, שיוצא מתחילה מפי האדם ההוא ועסקו בתורה ובתפילה big, big, big secret. Pay attention. The spiritual voice, it's impossible to take structure and to enter into, here he says, the ear of the prophet. Think of that as the mind or the conceptualization of the prophet's mind. Other than if it is originally cloaked in the form of a physical voice, I'll explain that in a minute, that originally emanated from the mouth of the person himself who studies Torah and prayer. Umitlabesh bo hakol ha'elyon, and within him is cloaked the supernal voice, ubo la'ozanan naviyahu, and then it comes into the ear of the prophet who hears it. V'yesh mi shemitlabesh b'kol tzadik zulato nichnas be'ozan anavi. There are those who, if you will receive the voice of a different tzaddik that enters into the ear, this comes from one's soul that is of the same source, or it comes from the similar vibration. He says here from the Eze Mitzvah, if he get that at Tzadikahu, meaning it comes from the same vibrational source. I read a lot. Let's just take a second and explain. The mind must be an open receptacle. When your mind creates positive thoughts in the realm of Torah, in the realms of mitzvot, whatever your religious background is, it doesn't have to be Jewish. Okay? Even though I use the Jewish terms, they're generic, right? Look at this as a universal creation of positivity. Your mind is projecting out the positivity, which creates the mind to be an opening to receive back positivity. And that is how an outside voice can come to you. From where? Depending on what you project out, depends what comes back to you. It states here that the voice can come from the vessel of your own self. That means that once you've created the proper mind structure, then something can come into your mind, which can then be received in consciousness. There's a process for that, but we'll get into that another time. Also, if and when you are acting religiously, sending out positive thoughts about your religious experience, or, like I mentioned earlier, you are reading the words of an individual and psychically calling upon them to help you explain their words. Well, by focusing on this, you can actually open that doorway. Let me give you an example. At the same time, I'm going to answer a question here in text. We are now reading the words of Rabbi Avraham Azulai. Now, Rabbi Azulai, God rest his soul, has been dead for hundreds of years. And his bones are buried in old Hebron, I believe, to this day. But I'm reading what he says here, and let's say, for example, I'm confused. I don't understand what he meant. What I can do is this. Read and reread his words. And granted, maybe I can, academically speaking, like any other scholar, cross-reference them to other books, look for the historical sources, read commentaries, or I can take a different course. Contemplate his words, reading them over and over, creating, if you will, his words to be like a mantra, a chant. Visualizing in my mind the spirit, soul, thought forms of Rabbi Azulai that have been around for hundreds of years floating around the world come into my mind. Come into me. Speak to me. Calling Rabbi Avraham Azulai, wherever your soul is, wherever your energy is, come on into me. And with appropriate active imagination, using the Jungian term, you can actually tap into something deep from within you. And that proverbial light bulb can pop over your head. Ding! Giving you brilliant insights. This momentary, temporary embrace of that spirit is what can be called in Kabbalistic literature an Ibbur, or if you will, like a piggyback possession of the moment by that spirit. Now, it's not like the spirit of the righteous comes and actually sits in your body or anything like that, but you're connecting with the mind thought. And as such, somebody's saying, is this a seance? No, forget those seances, please. This is all silly stuff. And somebody here is also making a joke in text, quoting from the old Bewitched television series, calling Dr. Bombay. You should know that on rural TV, the old series Bewitched is still on. We enjoy it to this day. But on a real level, on a psychological level, remember, we're talking here psychology. So understand it within that context. Now, when you are of a certain mindset and your voice goes forth, you create an opening for an in-quote voice to come back into you. That's how it works. It can come back from your own thoughts. It can come back from someone else's thoughts. Whose thoughts? No, not the devil's thoughts. Likes attract like. You're meditating on the spirit of the Baal Shem Tov or Rabbi Azulai, then the thoughts of Rabbi Azulai or the Baal Shem Tov might just come to you. That's how it works. You want to get an old understanding of this? I'll bring it to you from what was originally a Jewish source. We know that the Torah is universal. And those who contemplate the Torah, the universal Torah, can actually embrace it. And we say that the Torah can become flesh and dwell among us. For those of you who are familiar with Christianity, you might be familiar with this term as it was embraced in Christianity, in the Christian book of John, where it speaks of the Word of God and the Word of God becoming flesh and dwelling among us. Christians, unfortunately, misunderstood this as being an exclusive reference to Yeshu. They did not understand the Jewish original context, in which this was just speaking of a Jew's reflection and reference for their teacher, their Rebbe. Because to this very day, many a Jewish group, or for that matter, any mystical group that believes in the higher spirit coming and embodying people, the spirit of enlightenment, this is exactly what they believe. In the Buddhist tradition, this is what they believed Buddha was, or a Buddha. A Buddha is an enlightened one. Essentially, many Hasidim believe the same psychological construct about their Rebbes as the Buddhists believe about the Buddha. That he's the Word of God. Right? He's the man. Okay. From a psychological point of view, the experience from the point of the individual and the construct of how the disciples look at that individual, it's all the same. Like it or not, it is. It's the psychological truth of it. But this is how it's understood. So, moving right along. When the person is of the proper mindset, that they have projected out the positivity through their life, and now that they open up their mind to receive that, reception comes back to them, that is where the spirit of prophecy comes from. The tzaddik hazeh, shehi min harishonim shekadmu alav harbe, u'ma'ot anshe b'zmanenu, bo yitlabesh hakol elyon. So this righteous person who is receiving this, what is he receiving? He could very well be receiving a voice, a connection from something from ancient times, or it could even be something from our day. What's called the supernal voice that reveals secrets and the future. That is what prophecy is. Prophecy is not only prediction of the future. Thus saith the Lord, next Thursday at 3 o'clock, this or that's going to happen. That's one way to look at prophecy. Thus saith the Lord, let me show you the realities of the laws of science and the secrets of the universe, a la Enoch. That's also prophecy. Different kind, different style. But it's the same. It's the expansion of the cavity of the mind to experience the other parallel dimensions to which we have access, but to which we block that access. We're reopening. That's what it's all about. Everything that we're discussing here is a psychological expansion of the powers of the mind, expansion of the powers of consciousness, the ascent through the worlds, as we will call it mystically. Boy, oh boy. You know something? I'm pausing here because I'm looking at the material. Alright. I don't want to start the next section because I see we kind of ran out of time. The next section is the good one. It speaks about the actual techniques of how this is done and what it's like when it's performed. But like I said, we've ran out of time. But with the good grace of God, we'll pick this up in our next class, 2. And we will conclude this section before we jump in the Hesed Avraham to a completely different section which is related to this, which is going to speak about what's called the voice of the birds. Did you ever hear this old expression, a little birdie told me? That's somehow used within the context of psychic revelation? Well, there's actually something to that. And when we finish the discussion on prophecy, we will jump ahead to section 5, Nahar 27, in the Hesed Avraham, to discuss the voice of the birdie. So on that note, I'm going to conclude. And again, I want to thank you all for joining me in this special class in Hesed Avraham. God's blessings, God's grace. We'll pick up in part 2, our next class. Thanks again all for joining me. I'm your host, Ariel Tzadok. Come see me online at KosherTorah.com. God bless. Good night. Shalom. 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 Good night.